morning. You can be seated. Thank you. All right, welcome back. Morning, Mr. Garcia.
Judge, there's an issue that I'd like to address with you at the bench, please.
Okay. All right, are we ready for the jurors? And our first witness?
Your Honor, the state would be calling Charles Cummings.
All right, bring them in.
Jurors in the courtroom, Your Honor.
You can have a seat.
Jurors are present and accounted for.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for making your way back. Were you all able to abide by my instructions during the recess? All right, we're ready to get started with our first witness.
Your Honor, the state would be calling Charles Cummings.
solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Come over here.
Your Honor, good morning. May it please the court, Mr. Escobar, Mr. Michaels, Mr. Funderburg, Ms. Flores, good morning. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning. Mr. Cummings, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Mr. Cummings, I'm going to ask that you speak loudly and clearly into that microphone, please. And if you would, please, would you direct all your answers to the members of this jury?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Cummings, can you state your full legal name and spell your last name for the court reporter?
Charles J. Cummings, Jr., Cummings.
All right, now, Mr. Cummings, where do you live, sir?
I live in Land O'Lakes.
And how long have you lived in Land O'Lakes?
18 years.
And Mr. Cummings, what's your profession?
I'm retired.
Prior to retiring, what did you do?
I was in group insurance,
Okay.
health insurance.
How long were you in that business?
Close to 32 years.
All right. Are you married, sir?
No.
Do you have any children?
Yes, I do.
How many children do you have?
3.
And their names and ages?
Errol is about 45. Alex is 43, and Amber is 39.
Okay. And Mr. Cummings, directing your attention to January 13th of 2014, do you recall that day?
Yes, I do.
Is that day special to you?
Yes,
Can you tell the members of this jury why?
because it's my birthday.
Okay. On January 13th, 2014, was that a Monday?
Yes.
Did you take off from work?
Yes, I did.
Did you plan on going to the movies with your son, Alex?
Yes, sir.
Now, we talked about Alex briefly. Is Alex disabled?
Yes, he's fully disabled.
Okay. Directing your attention to that date, did you go to the Cobb Theater?
Yes, we did.
What movie were you wanting to see?
We wanted to see Lone Survivor.
Okay. You purchased tickets?
Yes, we did.
And what time was the showing?
I think it was about 1:30.
Okay. When you went in, did you go to the concession stand?
No, we did not.
Did you go straight into the theater?
Yes, we did.
When you went into the theater, can you tell the members of this jury what the lighting conditions were inside there?
There was midlight. It was not dark, it was not light. It was midlight,
Okay.
so there was enough light to see.
All right, so it wasn't completely dark like the movie was playing?
Absolutely not, no.
Okay. Did you have any difficulties getting to your seat?
No,
Did you have any difficulties observing the people that were in the theater at the time?
no.
Where do you normally sit when you go to a movie?
I normally like to sit in the middle.
Okay. In the middle, low,
Middle, high.
high?
Yes.
Okay. When you went into the movie theater and where you normally sit, was there a couple already sitting there?
Yes, there were people already sitting in those seats.
All right. Would that couple later became known to you as the Oulsons?
Yes,
So tell us, you look up and lo and behold, somebody's already sitting in where you would have sat.
correct.
Where did you and your son decide to sit?
We decided to sit at the end seats,
Okay.
same aisle.
All right. What aisle was it?
I think it was the second aisle back from the bistro,
Okay.
from the top.
And when you looked in that direction, could you tell if anybody was sitting behind the Oulsons?
Yes, there were people sitting there.
Okay. Was there an older couple sitting there?
There was a couple sitting there and maybe some other people.
Okay. So you take your seats.
Yes,
Are the previews playing?
yes,
Are they loud?
no,
Okay. You're watching the previews. Did you have a conversation with your son, Alex?
we would say we wanted to see this picture or we're not going to see this picture,
Okay.
things like that.
Did you have any difficulties hearing Alex?
No,
Could you hear conversations, say, 5 rows down?
not, I could hear people talking, but I didn't know what they were saying.
Okay. Now, let me ask you, you don't have any hearing disabilities or impairments, right?
No,
All right. So the previews are going. And during the previews, does anything draw your attention to your left?
Yes, it does.
Okay, what is the first thing that you saw or heard?
First thing I saw was a light from a cell phone.
Okay. And would that have been Mr. Oulson's cell phone?
It was Mr. Oulson's cell phone.
Where was it?
I believe it was on his lap.
Okay. Let me ask you, did you pay much attention to it?
No.
Well, all right, so you noticed it, and then what'd you do?
Back to watching the previews.
Okay. What's the next thing that happens?
The next thing that happened is someone is talking to Mr. Oulson about the cell phone.
Okay. Did Mr. Oulson respond to this gentleman?
Yes, he said something along the lines of, "I'm texting my babysitter," or "I'm texting my daughter's babysitter."
Okay.
Texting.
Texting. This person who you said you later became known to as Mr. Oulson,
Yes.
right? Was he screaming?
No.
Was he angry?
No.
Was he agitated at that time?
No. Informative.
Okay. So you hear these conversations, you go back to watching the previews, right?
Previews. Yes.
As you're watching the previews, what's the next thing that happens?
The next thing that happened is there was some type of interchange between Oulson and the gentleman sitting behind him, and the gentleman sitting behind him stood up and left the theater.
Okay. Did you hear that conversation, or you couldn't?
No, no, I could not hear their conversation.
Okay. So at that point, Mr. Reeves leaves.
There's the person behind him who was in a, yes, he left the theater.
All right. What was his demeanor as he left the theater?
He seemed to be shuffling his feet fairly quickly. As he passed my seat, he was mumbling to himself, and it sounded very agitated in that mumbling. And he also hit my seat and the back of my head as he was passing.
All right, let me ask you, so he hits the back of your seat. Did he say, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir"?
No, he did not.
Did he say, "Excuse me"?
No, he did not.
He didn't say anything to you.
No, he did not.
Did you see him walk out of the theater?
Yes, I did.
Did he have any difficulties walking?
He walked normal as far as I could see.
Okay. How long is he gone?
He's gone about 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay. While he's gone, is there anything else going on in the theater?
Not that I knew of, just watching the previews again.
All right. Did you see him coming back up?
Yes, I saw him coming back up.
Can you tell the members of this jury his gait? Was he walking rapidly, quick, slow?
He was walking a little bit faster than normal. The reason I watched him because I wanted to make sure he didn't hit my seat again.
Okay. Did he get to his row?
Yes, he did.
Did he have any difficulties? Did he hit the back of your seat or anything then?
No, he didn't.
Okay. Did you see him sit down?
I saw him go to where he was. I don't believe if he sat down or I saw him get as far as he got to his seat. I don't know if I noticed that he sat down.
Okay. So then you're watching the previews, right?
Back to the previews.
All right. Let me ask you something, Mr. Cummings. Do you wear glasses?
Yes, I do.
Back on January
I
13th?
used to wear glasses.
Okay. On January 13th of 2014, were you wearing glasses?
Yes, I was.
Were you nearsighted or farsighted?
Nearsighted.
Okay. You had your glasses on.
Correct.
Did you have any difficulties seeing in the movie theater?
No, I did not.
Okay. Do you have any problems with your peripheral vision?
On my right eye, I do. On my left eye, I do not.
Okay. So you indicated that it was Alex in the first seat, you in the second seat, right?
Correct. Yes.
So everything that occurred would have been to your left, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you didn't have any difficulty seeing?
No, I did not.
All right. You're sitting there, Mr. Reeves is back. What is the next thing that draws your attention to that area?
There seems to be a heated conversation
Okay. Between Mr. Oulson and Mr. Reeves?
between Mr. Oulson and Mr. Reeves.
Okay. Could you hear what Mr. Reeves said?
No, I could not hear what he said exactly, no.
All right, but you could hear him speaking.
I knew that they were conversing.
All right,
Yeah.
could you hear what Mr. Oulson said?
At one point, I heard what he said when he stood up.
Okay, and when he stood up, what did you hear him say?
Are you trying to get me thrown out of the theater or something like that?
All right. Now, prior to the shot, did you ever see Mr. Oulson climbing over his chair?
No, I did not.
Did you ever see him throw a punch?
No, I did not.
Did you ever see him throw an object?
No, I did not.
Prior to the shot, did you ever hear Mr. Reeves say anything or react as if he had been hit either by a punch or an object?
No,
Did you ever see him react, such as, oh, and grab his face
no, I did not.
prior to seeing the flash and hearing the gunshot? Did you ever see Mr. Oulson all the way back, Mr. Reeves all the way back in his chair saying either whoa, 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 or no, no, no?
I did not hear that. No,
Did you see it?
I did not hear it nor see it.
All right. So, getting back to the events, Mr. Oulson standing up, right?
Yes,
You indicated he said, what are you trying to get me thrown out of the theater?
yes.
What is the next thing that you observe?
The next thing I observe is popcorn in the air.
All right.
Oh.
Do you know how it got in the air?
I do not know how it got in the air, but when it was in the air, that's what caught my attention again.
All right. So popcorn's in the air.
Popcorn's in the air,
What's the next thing that happens?
flash, shot.
Flash and a bang.
Yes,
All right. Immediately or soon thereafter, did you hear Mr. Reeves make a statement?
yes, I did.
Okay. What did you hear him say?
Something along the lines of throw popcorn in my face or throw popcorn at me.
Okay. Did you realize what had happened?
I realized I was a shot,
All right.
and I didn't know if it was anybody was hit.
Okay.
At
So
that
you're, again, it's Alex and you, first and second seats.
Correct.
Did you observe either Mrs. Oulson or Mr. Oulson to start to walk towards the aisle?
Yes, I noticed they both did. Mrs.
Okay.
Oulson first, weeping a little bit, and then Chad was behind her by about a yard and a
All
half.
right. Was Mrs. Oulson saying anything?
She was just weeping and sounded like she was extremely scared.
All right. Did there come a time when Mr. Oulson was walking towards you?
Yes, he was starting to walk towards.
Prior to getting to where you were, almost at your feet, prior to falling, what, if anything, did he say?
He said, "I can't believe he shot me."
Did Mr. Oulson fall at your feet?
He did. He fell at my feet, and he also hit my son as he was falling.
Okay. When that happened, did you tell Alex to leave the theater and go call 911?
Yes, I was very concerned about my son. I was very concerned about his safety. I asked him to leave the theater, number one, for his safety, and number two, to call 911.
Okay.
But to get him out of the theater, not knowing what could happen next.
All right. Now let's go back a moment to the conversations that Mr. Oulson and Mr. Reeves were having. Did you ever hear Mr. Oulson threaten Mr. Reeves?
No, I did not hear him say that.
All right. Did you ever hear him drop the F-bomb
I did not hear any curse words that day.
at all?
None.
Did you ever hear him saying, excuse me for saying it, I'm going to kick your ass or I'm going to beat your ass or anything like that?
I did not hear that, no.
Did you ever hear Mr. Oulson threatening Mr. Reeves?
I did not hear him threatening him, no.
All right, so Mr. Oulson is at your feet. What are you doing?
We start, well, somebody came up behind me, but when he went to my feet and his head was on my left foot, I started resuscitation as best as I could. I wasn't sure where the bullet wound was, but I could feel blood on my hand.
Okay. So you started chest compressions?
Compressions is what it's called, yes.
All right. Was he shot in the chest?
I'm not sure where he was shot, but the blood started to come from his chest, so I'm assuming that's where it was. And then within a minute, I knew he was shot in the chest.
All right. So as Mr. Oulson is literally on your feet, are you observing or looking at Mr. Reeves to see what he's doing or not doing?
No,
You're paying attention to Mr. Oulson.
correct.
All right. Is there a time that obviously medical personnel come in and law enforcement comes in?
They came in about 15, 20 minutes later. There was someone helping me with Mr. Oulson, but when the law enforcement arrived, or the medics arrived, they said to me, "We'll take him." So at that
Okay.
point, I got up and left Chad Oulson.
All right. As you were attempting to do CPR on Mr. Oulson, did you get blood on your clothing and your hands and so on and so forth?
Yes. And my shoe, my flip-flops.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask the record reflect that I'm going to show to defense counsel States Exhibits S, T, U, V, W, and X for identification purposes. May I proceed, Judge?
Go ahead.
All right, may it please the court. Mr. Cummings, as you were performing CPR on Mr. Oulson, did you get blood on your clothing?
Yes.
Your shirt?
My shirt, my pants, my flip-flops.
Okay. What were you wearing that day?
I had a blue fishing shirt, a Columbia shirt, cut-off jeans, and flip-flops.
Okay. Did you have blood on your hands?
Yes,
Did you have blood on the palms of your hands?
yes.
Judge, may I approach the witness, please? Mr. Cummings, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit S for identification purposes. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, I do.
Is that you?
Yes, sir.
And does it depict the blood that you had described previously to the members of this jury?
Yes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to publish this to the members of this jury, please.
You may. Are you seeking for that to be admitted?
I'm sorry, Judge. Yes, Judge, I would admit it as it's
19,
19?
correct.
19, Judge?
Yep. It'll be admitted.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Cummings, one question that I had neglected to ask you. Did you ever see Mr. Oulson throw a cell phone?
No, I did not.
You said once medical personnel arrived, you went to look for your son.
Correct, that's what I did.
Did you find Alex?
Yes, I did.
Where was he?
He was outside the theater.
Okay. Did you go back into the theater?
Yes, we did.
Were you requested to go back in the theater by law enforcement?
Yes, we were.
Where did you go?
We went to a section in the lower section of the movie theater, and they asked us to stay there.
Was it at the very bottom of the movie
At the
theater?
the bottom seats, yes.
How many people would you say were there?
15, 20.
Okay. Were they congregated in like groups, so to speak?
They were congregated with the people they came to the movie with, I think.
Right, like a husband and wife,
Yeah.
and then maybe another couple?
Like Alex and I stayed together. right?
Okay. Did you hear them conversing?
I could hear them conversing, but I didn't hear what they were saying.
Okay. Did you hear any of them saying anything about what they had just seen or heard?
No, nor was I listening
Okay.
for that.
Did you talk to any of them?
No,
Did you know any of them?
no,
Did you know anyone that was in that movie theater?
no,
Okay. So y'all are gathered around down there, right?
yes,
Does law enforcement come and pass out what would be a witness statement, a blank form?
they passed out something that was a blank form. I didn't know what it was.
All right. Were you given any instructions as to what to do?
Yeah, what did you see? Did you write it down? Something like that.
Okay. And did you in fact give a written statement?
Yes, I did.
And was it brief?
It was brief. I just wanted to write the salient points.
Okay.
I wasn't given instructions on anything else.
The main topics, right?
The main points as to what happened.
At the time you gave the written statement, did you know that you were going to get interviewed by a Pasco County detective?
Yes, I did.
And after you had given the written statement, did you subsequently get interviewed by Detective James Garapi of the Pasco County Sheriff's Office?
I was interviewed by a detective. I can't say if that's his name or not. Yes.
Okay. And did you go more in depth with Detective Garapi as to what you saw, what you heard?
Yes.
And he was taking notes.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Cummings, did you ever see Mr. Oulson with either his knee or standing in his seat?
No, I did not.
Did you ever see him completely coming over his seat and in Mr. Reeves' space?
No, I did not.
Did you ever see Mr. Oulson in an aggressive stance towards Mr. Reeves?
No, I did not.
Did you ever see Mr. Reeves with his left hand out, holding or pushing Mr. Oulson away?
No, I did not.
May I have a moment, Your Honor, please?
You may.
Your Honor, I have no further questions of Mr. Cummings at this time. Thank you.
Garcia. Mr. Michaels?
Mr. Cummings, I'm just going to start with one of the last things you talked about with the prosecutor. You told the prosecutor that when you were interviewed, first of all, when you did your statement form, you just wrote bare details.
Yes, sir.
When you talked to the detective, however, you gave the detective all the details within your knowledge, right?
I gave him a lot more detail, yes.
Okay, but you certainly gave him everything you knew at the time, right?
I gave him everything that I saw at the time, within the condition of my mind at the time.
Okay, and you were able to give him quotes of what people said, for instance, right?
Whatever I gave him, I gave him.
And so you understood what he was saying to you, right?
Yes, I did.
You didn't have any difficulty in communicating with him?
No, but it's the first time I had that type of communication.
I understand. I'm just trying to understand because we're talking about a, a written statement which is very bare and then a more involved interview.
Correct,
So the interview is more involved in more details.
correct.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about, number one, walking into the theater. The prosecutor asked you if it's loud, because you went in during the previews and you said it wasn't loud.
No, it's the normal sound of a preview.
Okay, so it was pretty loud then, right?
No, I could hear, I could hear, but I could also see people, hear people.
So you wouldn't call it pretty loud?
No,
Okay. Page 18, lines 18 through 25. I know we're here in 2020.
Your Honor, I would object. The proper way would be to show the witness the statement first.
Your Honor, may we approach? Mr. Cummings, in this case, you gave a deposition back on March 16, 2015. Remember that?
I remember depositions in this case, yes.
Okay, maybe not the exact
The
date.
exact date, yes, sir.
But you remember at some point sitting in an office in this building, right?
Yes,
With a court reporter,
yes,
with myself, right?
yes,
Mr. Escobar,
yes,
a couple of members of the state attorney's office.
correct,
We put you under oath, remember that?
correct,
Swore to tell the truth. And we asked you questions,
correct,
and you gave us answers.
correct.
Well,
Your Honor, before you answer the questions, can you briefly please?
Yeah.
okay. Let's go back to talking about the deposition, okay?
Yes,
The question was asked, to put it into context, I'll go back a little bit. And you sat down, question, what were the noise conditions in there? Were the previews playing? Answer, just the previews. Remember that?
yes,
Okay. Question, line 22, were they loud? Answer, pretty loud. Remember that?
yes,
Okay. So now you agree with me that the previews were playing and it was pretty loud in there, right?
there are parts of previews that are pretty loud, depending upon the scene that they're showing. If they're showing an action scene, it's usually louder than when they have a dialogue or a love scene, or an explanation.
All right. And
So
so,
it's mixed.
and so is there a reason why you didn't make that explanation to the prosecutor and you feel compelled to make it to me now?
No,
During the previews, you heard some conversations to your left, right?
Yes,
Now, to your left was seated the individuals that turn out to be Mr. and Mrs. Oulson.
yes,
Mr. Oulson closer to you, Mrs. Oulson on the other side of Mr. Oulson.
yes,
Now, at first, you just heard one voice, and that was Mr. Oulson's voice.
yes,
He's in the same row.
yes.
And that's when you heard something about texting my daughter.
Texting my daughter or my daughter's babysitter.
Okay. And you said that that person was doing it in a informational tone, but he was also doing it in an authoritative voice, right?
He was explaining what he was doing, yes. It was,
It was an authoritative voice, right?
I don't think it was authoritative. I think it was frustrational, maybe.
Okay. Page 21, line 3. Go back to that deposition, okay? Okay? Question, line 2. Was he doing that in a loud voice? The answer before was, just to put it in context, he was explaining to someone about texting and something about his daughter. Remember that?
Yes,
Question, was he doing that in a loud voice? Answer, authoritarian. Remember that?
Judge, I'm
Yes.
going to object. If you read further, he also says informational. So I think Mr. Michaels is taking that out of context.
Sustained. Read.
Okay. You did use that word though, right?
I used that word.
And that voice was louder than the previews were.
Yes, I could hear him, yes.
And it's been your experience, in theaters, usually people don't talk that loud, right?
Usually they don't talk. The nicer people don't.
Now, the person behind Mr. Oulson that turns out to be Curtis Reeves gets up and leaves the theater.
Yes,
Now, you talk about him bumping your chair and your head. We can agree you don't know what part of his body did that.
no, I'm assuming his leg, knee.
And certainly, you don't take that as on purpose,
No,
because you're a big fella, and back then you were even bigger fella. We're talking about a while back now, right?
yes, sir.
I know you used to lift weights and all that.
Yes, sir.
And so you were leaning back in your chair a bit to be comfortable watching the movie, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And so the bumping of your chair was accidental as far as you knew, right?
I didn't think he was wanting to hit the back of my chair nor the back of my head.
All right. Now, you said that Mr. Reeves was mumbling. We can agree that you didn't hear what he was saying.
No, I didn't. No, I couldn't understand what he was saying.
So you don't know if as he was passing people, he was saying, "Excuse me, pardon me." You don't know what he was
He
saying.
didn't say, "Excuse me." I would have understood that.
Well, if he
was
mumbled,
he was mumbling before he got to me.
okay, so you could hear him mumbling before he got to you.
Yeah, he was shuffling his feet and mumbling, and then he passed by.
Okay, and we can agree you didn't hear what he was saying.
Absolutely not.
So you're telling us you can hear what he's not saying, but you can't hear what he's saying, right?
Correct.
Now, when you saw him walking, he wasn't walking in a way that gave you the impression that he was upset. I'm talking about Mr. Reeves, right?
Upset?
Right.
I couldn't tell, but if his gait said he was upset, no.
Okay. So in other words, he wasn't stomping out or walking out.
No, he was not. But he was moving.
Now, you also saw when he came back up the stairs.
Yes,
And when you saw Mr. Reeves coming back up the stairs again, nothing that you observed indicated to you that he was mad, right?
no,
Nothing indicated to you that Mr. Reeves was angry at all, right?
no,
And then within a couple of minutes of Mr. Reeves coming back, now a conversation you hear again between Mr. Oulson and Mr. Reeves, right?
yes,
And what you heard is not Mr. Reeves' voice, you heard Mr. Oulson's voice, right?
yes,
And it's a voice you recognized before when you heard it during the previews.
yes.
You didn't hear any other voice.
No, I could not hear the voice.
You couldn't hear the voice of Mr. Reeves?
No, I could not hear. I could hear he was talking. There was some conversation, but I wasn't sure what they were saying.
You could only hear Mr. Olson's voice?
Yes, the only discernible voice was Chad Oulson's.
And you did not hear any other voice?
No, I can't say who was speaking, but he was speaking with someone.
So you're saying now you heard another voice,
Yes.
okay? Page 31. Lines 10 through 12. Going back to the deposition, okay?
Yes.
Question, okay. Did you hear any other voice other than Mr. Olson's? Answer, no. Remember that?
Yes.
And that's a statement you gave under oath back
Yes.
years ago, right?
Yes.
Now, when you heard Mr. Oulson and nobody else, he sounded irritated to you, right? Mr. Oulson?
Sounded irritated, yes.
And he sounded mad, right?
Sounded upset.
Did he sound mad to you?
I don't know, upset, mad,
Is it the same to you?
no.
Okay, so mad is different than upset.
Yeah, mad is, you're probably going to take some action. Upset is you're in the discussion phase.
So add means that if somebody's mad to you, it means they're going to take some action. They're more angry than just being upset.
Potentially, correct.
Page 32. Lines 3 and 4. To put it in context, we'll start on page 31, line 23. Question, we're now after Mr. Reeves comes back. Mr. Olson's back to saying something, and he's saying something in that same loud tone. Question, answer, he's saying something, he sounds irritated. Question, okay, he sounds mad. Answer, yeah. Right?
Okay, so I said that.
I'm going to object. It's improper impeachment, that's what he said.
And so you recall in that deposition saying that Mr. Oulson was mad, right?
Yes.
Now, during this time where Mr. Oulson sounds mad, he says something to the effect of, you trying to get me kicked out of the movie, something like that.
Yes.
And he's directing that towards Mr. Reeves.
He was talking to Mr. Reeves, yes.
And he said that in a loud tone, right?
Yes, I could hear that.
And that's when he, Mr. Oulson, stood up.
I think he was standing up when he said it.
And at first he was facing the theater screen when he stood up, then he turned to face Mr. Reeves.
He was talking to him, yes.
And at the time he was irritated, right?
Yes.
Now, he was leaning towards Mr. Reeves at this time like a person who was upset would talk to someone.
He was leaning slightly over to get his point across.
Well, would you characterize it as like a person who was upset would talk to someone?
Yes.
And he was yelling, right?
I could hear his voice, yes.
He was yelling, was he not?
He brought it, his voice was above normal, yes.
Well, let's talk about that. To you, voice above normal is different than yelling, isn't it?
It wasn't a total yell. I mean, a total yell is obviously almost screaming. He wasn't screaming it, but his voice was above normal, yes.
Was it yelling?
No, I wouldn't say it was yelling.
Page 40, lines 24 and 25. Question, line 24. He was yelling? Answer, yeah. Remember that?
Yes,
Now, the prosecutor asked you, did you see Mr. Oulson throw anything? You said no, right?
I did not see him throw anything.
You didn't see Mr. Oulson lean into the aisle where Mr. Reeves was seated and with his wife at all?
No, I did not.
You didn't see him reach in to grab the popcorn?
I did not see that.
Now, you wrote a statement, and may I show it to you? Your Honor, I guess I should mark this as defense exhibit. I'm not going to place it into evidence at this time, but for identification, I'm not sure where we are. Is this number one, maybe?
What is it? Sure.
Mr. Cummings, I'm going to show you something that has been marked for identification purposes as Defense Exhibit 111. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? All right.
Okay,
There you go, Mr. Cummings. Recognize that document?
yes,
Okay. And is that your signature at the bottom?
yes,
Is that your handwriting?
yes,
You see the date on it? Should be somewhere
yes, yes, I
like
see
that.
that, yes,
Okay. And so you recognize that document, correct?
Yes.
And that's a document that you hand wrote, correct?
yes,
And that you signed?
yes,
And that happened at the time of the incident at the theater, right?
yes,
Okay. Thank you. You had a chance to read it? Did I give you a chance to read it? I
Yes,
apologize.
yeah.
Okay. So we can agree that in that document, you didn't put anything about throw popcorn at me, that sort of thing, right?
Judge, you have to maybe approach.
As I was saying, Mr. Cummings, had a chance to look at your written statement, and there's nothing in there about the popcorn. You'll agree with me, right?
yes,
And certainly you explained to the prosecutor, well, I didn't really give a very detailed statement, I just put in the basics, right?
salient points,
Okay. Such as, you will agree with me that the old man came back alone, talking about Mr. Reeves, right?
yes,
He got into an argument with the man sitting next to me, Mr. Oulson, right?
yes,
Man sitting to right of me got up and confronted old man.
correct,
Okay, and then Mr. Oulson got shot.
correct,
Okay. Now, you talked to a police officer, a detective, the prosecutor talked to you about that and said, remember speaking to Detective Garapi, your answer was, I don't remember the name,
Correct.
but certainly you remember speaking to the detective.
Yes,
And you told the prosecutor you gave a more detailed
yes,
account of what happened, right?
yes.
Well, do you remember telling that detective that, that you attended the movie with your son Alexander, remember that?
Yes,
That they, talking about Mr. Oulson, were sitting in,
Jack, can we approach?
all right. You told the detective you attended the movie with your son Alexander, remember that?
yes,
Okay. And that Mr. Oulson was sitting in the same, you were sitting in the same role as Mr. Oulson, right?
yes,
Okay. You heard some kind of communication during the preview, right?
yes,
Between Mr. Oulson and Mr. Reeves.
yes,
That Mr. Reeves left the theater, kicked the back of the Mr. Oulson seat.
that was a mistake, but I don't know if he did that.
Okay, you meant your seat.
I don't know, yes, he hit my seat, I don't know if he hit Olson's seat.
Okay. That Mr. Reeves was grumbling as he left.
Yes,
Then at some point, that Mr. Oulson then stood up and tossed his popcorn in the air.
there was popcorn in the air.
Okay. That you didn't think that Mr. Oulson threw it directly at Mr. Reeves.
I just saw popcorn in the air.
You don't remember saying that.
Not correctly, no.
Pardon me?
Not exactly, no.
Okay. Less than 20 seconds later, the suspect, Mr. Reeves, shot Mr. Oulson in the chest and stated, "Do that to my face." Remember that? It's in quotation marks.
Yes,
Okay. So you didn't tell that detective that Mr. Reeves said, "Throw popcorn at me," right?
whatever I told the detective that time, I told him,
You told him that Mr. Reeves said, "Do that to my face." Right? You agree with that?
okay, that's what I said.
May I have a moment, Judge? No further questions.
Redirect?
Judge, we have no further questions of Mr. Cummings.
Thank you. May this witness be released?
We're good, we have him under subpoena.
Subject to recall, Your Honor.
Okay, subject to recall. Mr. Cummings, you're free to go, but it's possible you could get recalled. You could, are you available by cell phone or?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 10-minute recess, and all things being equal, if you don't mind, when we take recesses, would you just either head to the jury pool room and stay there, or go in the deliberation room? There's a lot of folks out and about, and I don't want you to run into any conversations, okay? So head to the jury pool room or stay back there. All right? 10 minutes. Remember my instructions during the recess.
All rise
Thank
for the
you.
recess for